I'm investigative journalist Mollye Barrows. For years, I've covered the stories that made headlines in Northwest Florida and all along the Gulf Coast. Murders, missing persons, and mysteries of all kinds. These cases are far from over for many victims because the full story has yet to surface. Join me for Gulf Coast Confidential, where I dive into the saltier side of the South and expose the lies, greed, and corruption that often weighs down the truth. It's time to turn the tide and get a shot at justice. Hi, I'm investigative journalist Mollye Barrows. I've been covering crime in Florida's Panhandle for a long time, and welcome to the podcast Gulf Coast Confidential Conversations. Here, my co-host Pam Hill and I dive into the deep end and discuss what we can learn from a lot of the true crime cases that I cover on Gulf Coast Confidential. Pam, her sister, Sharon Aydelott, was murdered by her son on Christmas Eve 2013, and as a result, she has a unique perspective on a lot of these crimes and scandals that I cover. She's also a survivor of violent crime, a grief and loneliness researcher, and a pharmacist. So we always like to hear what Pam has to say because she's be smart.
Probably talk a lot.
I know. Well, I like it. I think we both could fall into that description category. But today we're talking about Gannon Stauch. You know, if you've been following the news, that was a headline-making case for years now. But the 11-year-old boy was killed by his stepmother in Colorado in 2020. You may be wondering what connection that has to the Gulf Coast. Well, she stuffed his small body in a suitcase, and she drove clear across the country to toss him over the side of a bridge right here in Northwest Florida, where he was found off Highway 90. It's a main artery that runs across the north part of the state through the Panhandle, and it probably seemed remote to her, but it was not remote. And some bridge and basically Department of Transportation workers were down there, and they found the suitcase, and there's a memorial to him, in fact, where it was found. And if you want to hear more about the details of that case, the nuts and bolts of Gannon's death, you can watch or listen to my podcast, Unwanted Baggage. But in May, his stepmother, Letecia, also known as Tisha Stauch, was convicted of first-degree murder after deliberation, first-degree murder of a child by a person in a position of trust, tampering with a deceased human body, and tampering with physical evidence. And this is your favorite defense, but she tried to defend herself by saying she was insane at the time she attacked him. Mm-hmm. And attack him she did. She stabbed Gannon 18 times before hitting him in the head and then shooting him once in the jaw. And in fact, they found 2 more bullets in the pillow. So I guess she was just, I don't understand. But it's heartbreaking. And, when they did find his body, they found, and we'll get into a lot of this, but some of the evidence that they had against her, I mean, it's just overwhelming, and so much of it's digital. But they found pictures on her phone of the morning that, of the day that she killed him. Mm-hmm. He was homesick from school, and he was resting in his bed with the little shark pattern sheets and pillowcases, and they found that same shark pattern bedding in the suitcase with his body when they found him here, right just outside of Pace. But she truly is the definition of an evil, wicked stepmother.
She is a step monster.
Yes.
She truly is. And, I mean, in the little suitcase, they said it was a little shark pillow, too.
Yes.
It's just unreal. I mean, she's a stepmother. From what I understand, a lot of us have stepmothers and stepfathers, but she was just so uncomfortable being married to, I think his name's Al.
Yes.
Gannon's dad, and she just felt like she was a babysitter, and she's doing all the work, and nobody's helping her. And from what I understand, the little boy wasn't high maintenance or anything, but it doesn't matter if he was.
Right.
But she just had done, something was very wrong with her. I think she just resented having to work and take care of somebody else's children. Well, don't marry somebody with children. Or if you don't want children, stay away from them, or just don't hurt them. You go somewhere else.
Right. Right.
I just don't understand that for the life of me. They're children, but she just wanted everything her way. I saw on some
didn't want to work for it.
No, she didn't. Like. And then I saw when I was doing some of the reading, some of her Google searches and stuff said how to find a man that will take care of me. What can I do for
a man without kids?
Right, a man without kids. What can I do for the least amount of money? Or how? Basically, she was even looking things up, like when she did this and looking. Google searching, find an immigrant that wants to go to jail.
Good Lord.
So she wanted someone to take the blame for her.
That reminds me of Susan Smith when she murdered her boys and put the blame on a black man, tapping into local prejudices.
Exactly. And what I think about with all this kind of stuff that happens like this, people don't want to correct themselves. They want to hurt someone else.
Yes.
And you hear me say this all the time. We don't have to turn but to the 4th book in the Bible. 10, 12 pages in the Bible to find out about Cain and Abel, someone that doesn't want to change the way they want to be, but I'll just hit you in the back of the head with a rock and kill you, or I'll shoot you and I'll stab you and I'll butcher you up and put you in a suitcase and stuff, but I'm not changing.
Right. You're the problem.
Yeah, everybody's
I'll fix
a problem.
Not me.
Right. And then they want to say, I'm insane. You're the devil.
Right. Well, yeah, the defense did argue that she killed Gannon during a psychotic break caused by trauma from being physically, emotionally, and sexually abused during her childhood. And I'm sure if those things happen, they did contribute. But there are a lot of people who also suffer those evils, and they don't grow up to kill their stepchildren.
Right. Well, Gannon didn't deserve that. He didn't bring it on. And that's why when you're broken or you got something going on, get help yourself. You can't just go around killing people because you don't like what's going on in your life.
Yes.
Never mind. Let's just go.
I know. Well, experts at the state mental hospital actually concluded that she had a personality disorder with borderline and narcissistic features. But in fact, she was sane at the time Gannon was killed. And under Colorado law, that means understanding the difference between right and wrong and being able to form the intent to commit a crime. And golly, the evidence that they had against her sure showed so much intent, much, premeditation and planning. She was so unhappy. And you mentioned some of those Google searches, and I did a little bit of a dive into that documentation as well, and just search after search of everything from what would it cost to move, can they find my phone if it's turned off. She did some of these searches from Gannon's phone himself the day that she killed him while he was still alive, and prosecutors were like, yeah, this goes to show intent. She knew exactly what she was planning to do. They were out running errands. They came back, and they believe that she killed him a short time after she got back. They found all kinds of blood evidence in his room. His bedroom was in the basement of this 2,500 square foot ranch house. There was another bedroom down there too, and then she just came up with all these crazy stories. And that was another reason police kept looking so closely at her, much like we talked about the kidnapping and murder of 12-year-old Naomi Jones in Pensacola back in 2017, and how the suspect who later who was arrested and convicted of her death, how he basically blamed her and kept changing his story, and his inconsistencies gave him away. Well, Letecia Stauch, her inconsistencies gave her away to police almost immediately, and she claimed to be raped at one point. Said that Gannon had tried to jump on the back of the attacker and was thrown across the room, and then he ran off with the boy. So they took her to the hospital to get her, a rape exam, a sexual assault exam, and she snuck out and took off and had her daughter, her daughter from her previous marriage, who was 17 at the time, come pick her up not far from the hospital. And prosecutors were saying, she just knew she was going to get caught in her lies.
Yeah. She named that person Eduardo and Quincy. She came up with names on that. She had thought of everything. I hate to say someone like that's smart or brilliant because they're clever and devious.
Conniving.
Yeah, but there's some form of intelligence in there. She even had come up with the ruse that why Gannon was going to be at home the day that she decided to murder him, that his stomach hurt and he was embarrassed what happened in the bathroom and this, that, and the other. And so she said, I'm just going to stay home with him because his father was away working somewhere.
Yes, he was he was deployed with the National Guard, basically. So he was off doing that regular training.
Well, Letecia, she gets on the phone and calls Al and tells him, well, I'm just going to call off work. She's a teacher, special needs teacher. I'm going to call off work today. So I'm going to lie to the lady I'm going to call into. So she calls her at 4:30 in the morning or sends her a text or something and says, oh, my stepdad got killed. He was walking on the side of the road and he got killed. That wasn't true.
Random, by the way.
Yeah, random. Exactly. And
goes to show where her mind was, thinking about death.
Right, exactly. And thinking about, she's got to cover everything and trying to elicit everybody's empathy and sympathy and heartfelt stuff and everything.
So she feels sorry for herself, too.
Yep. So she creates all this chaos and all these lies, but she's sending texts to Al, the daddy, going, well, Gannon burnt something with a candle. She just created more chaos, and he's not hurt. He's burned a little bit, and not to worry, I've fixed it. And, she's the hero in every story, as a narcissist is. And so she's planning all this, creating all this chaos, and all the time, she's fixing to sign his death warrant.
I know, because she's so resentful of her husband, and that was the basically the case that prosecutors presented, that she was unhappy with Al and that she killed Gannon to get back at him. And some of those internet searches, like we were talking about, support that. I mean, she searched over and over again why basically criticizing their mother for not being there to support her kids. It takes 4 people to parent a child? Why am I the only one? And it's just search after search of, my husband doesn't pay attention to me. What can I do to make my husband want me? My husband posts about everything else but me, and here I am taking care of these children. I'm just a babysitter. I'm just a glorified babysitter, and just but again, walk away.
Yeah.
And that's what
she knew. She knew he had children. I mean, they weren't hidden away.
Yeah, and that's what struck me too, is that she was like, find a man without kids.
Yeah.
Find is there free money available to help people get out of a bad situation? So money and a man is what she wanted. Like, in her mind, it seemed like that was going to fix her problems, and I'm like, you're the problem.
Right. So you kill a little boy along the way.
Right. Insane. And also, she had searched going to Florida. Pensacola Beach was one of them, which explains another reason she traveled through here with his body on her way to South Carolina, when she realized that I think police were starting to narrow in. She had moved his body after she killed him to a neighboring county, and then went and rented a car and then picked up his body. And she and her daughter drove across the country, basically.
Yeah, she recruited that oldest child of hers, because I guess that child had a little bit of loyalty to her mother. And, I can't quite figure all that out, what that relationship's like. But it seemed like she drug her into everything, even brought her down here. I guess, no. I don't know if the girl saw, I don't think she's a little girl, I think she's a teenager.
Well, she was 17 at the time, yes.
And brought her here. I would have so many questions about stuff, and I mean, I question everything.
Well, her mom had her pick up cleaning supplies the day she killed him.
And he's not there anymore.
Right.
He's gone. Did she take his body in the suitcase over to the neighboring county for how long? A while?
Yeah, I don't think he was in the suitcase yet at that point. I think she just put him in the back of her car, left him there, and then I think she decided she needed to move him.
In the elements. And everything.
Yeah, they found his DNA on a piece of particle board that was at the scene.
Because that part wasn't clear to me, but the fact that he's missing. I mean, with Naomi, she was missing for a little while, and the family's gone crazy, going, where is she? Where is she? Right.
I know. It is very, very Oedipus.
Yeah.
In that regard, killing the husband or killing the children to get back at the man.
Yeah.
And again, I did wonder about the daughter as well, but police said because she wasn't involved in the murder, and that is her mother, I think there was just this decision not to pursue what she knew or did not know. I mean, she didn't assist in killing him, and she didn't intentionally, when she picked up the cleaning supplies, she had no idea at that point what had happened. Her mom just said, pick up carpet cleaner and vinegar and baking soda and that sort of thing.
If I was a dad, I would have been home immediately, I think.
Well, he did. He came home as soon as he knew that the child had been reported missing. His mother flew in from South Carolina, and much similar to other searches that we've seen, like we talked about with Naomi Jones, the community rallied around the family. They searched. As soon as she was arrested or charged with his murder, and his body hadn't been found yet at that point, he filed for divorce.
Good.
And I think he has since, remarried. But, I can't imagine just the grief, and not that he should feel guilty, but I imagine he does feel guilty. He married this woman. He left his child in the care of a monster unknowingly.
Yeah,
he has no reason to feel that way. But I can imagine if I put myself in those shoes, that's what's going to be going on in my head. How did I miss these signs? How did I not see that this woman was crazy? But when you're busy, you're working, and you don't think that way, you don't necessarily look at indications. What may seem like a red flag to other people may not seem like a red flag to you if that's not how you think.
And she may not have shown any of that behavior.
Right.
You know my
she
philosophy.
She did have some crazy behavior, but not to that extent, I think.
I think anybody that good for a year.
Right. But,
really
she had come from South Carolina as well, and there was just some deceptive behavior that they caught her in. She was working for 2 different school districts at one time, which was a no-no. And so there was just this pattern of, I'm going to do what I want to do because it suits me.
Right.
I don't think anybody would look at that initially and say, well, they're going to grow up or she's going to, years from now, she's going to kill her 11-year-old stepson.
Yeah.
Right. But it is indicative of someone who thinks the rules don't apply to them.
Flim-flammer.
Right.
Flim-flammer.
Exactly. So she was sentenced, I think, 12. She got different sentences for the different crimes, but essentially she's going to be serving life in prison without parole. And I thought it was interesting that she tried to plead insanity, and that has special impact for you because your nephew, Brandon Aydelott, was found not guilty by reason of insanity in the state of Florida for killing his mom. And again, if you've not followed Pam's story, you can check that out. And Gulf Coast Confidential Conversations, as well as Gulf Coast Confidential, there are a number of episodes where we talk about the case, including Mommy Killer 1 and 2, Confessions in the Field House, Murder and Madness. Because there isn't an option for guilty by reason of insanity. It is a defense, not guilty by reason of insanity, but it's like once they're found not guilty by reason of insanity, then they go into the custody of the Department of Children and Families. They're taken to a facility in Chattahoochee for the most part, which is where the Florida State Hospital is for the criminally insane. Right. Brandon is being recommended, not yet. He's basically, they're saying he still meets the criteria for commitment, but the psychologist said last fall that she felt like he was trending towards a recommendation for possible placement in a group home or, somewhere outside of Florida State Hospital. Right. So when you hear other cases like Letecia, trying to say that she was crazy at the time that she killed him, you do have to be crazy to do something like that. But are you so crazy that you don't know what you're doing? Right. And in Brandon's case, they felt like he had schizophrenia and that he didn't know what he was doing. But you're not buying that. No, and you're certainly not buying her.
I don't buy hers either. I don't buy anybody's because you are the not guilty by reason of insanity. I can buy guilty by reason of insanity because you are guilty. All these people admitted to this stuff. My nephew did. Brandon admitted and giggled and laughed about it and smirked and smiled to the deputies.
Right.
And he said
there was a purpose to what he was doing.
He had a mission. He basically heard his father's voice in his head saying, kill your mother. So that's what he did. So, and he said, I felt like I did the right thing. But also, I've learned, and from him, exactly what he did to prepare to go kill Sharon. Looking for a gun, picking out the biggest knife. I know how far he drove. I knew what kind of traffic he had to negotiate. I knew what kind of twists and turns. I know he called her to the door. There's a lot of things. I know her last words were help. He told me,
right.
And he's proud of it. And the reason about insanity, I don't remember anybody telling me not guilty by reason of insanity because I know me. You're not going to say not guilty when you stood there and said you killed my sister, murdered her, because they always call it the insanity defense. They don't say that not guilty in there. And that is one law that I'm going to work so hard on to change, to guilty by reason of insanity. But Bill Edens, the state attorney, told us, and every citizen in Florida, he said he'll never get out. He killed his mother, for heaven's sakes. That's exactly what he said. And I'm in immediate grief, still thinking about my sister being murdered. And I'm like, well, if he'll never get out, put him in the hospital there. That was the kindest thing we could do.
And you thought that would be something Sharon would want for him.
Yeah. And unbeknownst to us, did I know that the system was going to turn around and send us to a life sentence of terror and horror and never being able to have any moving forward from this grief and the worst thing that's ever happened to my parents and my sisters and my family and me, our life.
Right, because the way the process works is his case comes up for review and assessment every 6 months.
Every
6 months, it's all brought back up.
And they come up, the psychologists come up and they kind of got a little lilt in their voice and they're a little bit happy, like, well, let me tell you, he's learning to cook eggs and he's a hall monitor and he does what we say and this, that, and the other. He doesn't do what they say. And he already knew how to cook eggs, and he's already known how to tattle on people. That's not a big deal. But
he already knows how to tell people what they want to hear.
Exactly.
He told you that as well.
But see, what I have refrained from, and was probably a big mistake in my part, in which I'm changing now, I want to tell everybody, and I don't like to do it, but for what it does to me, it makes me sick. I want to tell everybody exactly what he did to Sharon. How he slit her throat from ear to ear, almost decapitated her, gouged her eyes out, knocked part of her jaw across the room. Her teeth are scattered like chiclets under her own
because
Christmas
he used
tree.
A baseball bat along with multiple knives.
Then he stomped her, and then he has her blood and gray matter all over the house, all over the Christmas tree. And you don't get to tell that when someone pleads insanity.
Right, I know. And he stepped over her body with a Sprite in his hand after he went to the refrigerator to quench his thirst.
Yeah, he went there to celebrate that. Nobody else in that house drinks Sprite, just Brandon. He wasn't living there. Sharon had gone to the store to get it in case he wanted to come over.
Right, I know. And it's another situation, and again, you can hear more about it in the other episodes where we talk about it, Mommy Killer. But, it was just another situation where it seems as though Brandon was blaming her for his problems. There was a lot more to the story, what was going on. Sharon and his father had divorced. He was living with his dad at the time, and his dad was resentful, blamed Sharon, even though he was the one that filed for the divorce, even though he was the one who had been caught having an inappropriate relationship with a 14-year-old student, and yet he still blamed Sharon for basically not supporting him in that, not covering for him, not telling him it was okay. And it seems as though Brandon had that in his head, that he did say his dad's voice was in his head. So, but going back to this not wanting to take responsibility, whether putting the blame on the victim, and it was the same with Letecia Stauch. She basically was like, this kid is a pain in the butt. I don't want to take care of him. I'm resentful of my husband for leaving me with this. And she could have walked away. She could have left. She didn't have to wait for a man. She didn't have to wait for money. She could have just said, I'm unhappy. I need to make a change. I need to be responsible. Brandon could have made the same decision. And I don't care that he was hearing voices. He made the decision to listen to those voices. He wasn't helpless. And again, I'm not an expert, and I think it's a very touchy subject. Anytime I post about it, you get people talking about like, oh, I'm sympathetic for people with mental illness. I understand, but when it gets to criminally insane behavior, and psychiatry is not an exact science, the state of Florida is not necessarily, or any state for that matter, I hate to be cynical, but they're not necessarily motivated by the best interest of the person that they're treating. They're like, how do we treat them enough to where they're obedient, where they're taking their medication, they're not pushing back? That's their definition of being fixed, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they've addressed the root of the problem, that this person has changed, that the voices aren't going to come back. As soon as they get out, half the time they don't want to take the medication. That's a big part of the problem.
I see that. I'm a pharmacist. I see people every day that aren't even as affected have the schizophrenia. If you are insane, when you kill somebody, you're still insane. You're still, if their diagnosis is schizophrenia, you still have schizophrenia, and he didn't take his medicine when he's there. I know people don't take medicine. The untoward effects and the side effects of antipsychotics are horrible. They're just horrible, especially to a young man. It slows them down, decreases their libido. They walk around with cotton mouth and grainy eyes and all kind of just unpleasant stuff. I get it, but you don't get to kill my sister just because you say your brain's not working right. I get so upset with people linking mental illness to forensic crimes. That is not the same. That is not the same. I have a lot of tenderheartedness toward mental illness. We all have some degree of something going on. Depression's mental illness. Anxiety's mental illness. Feeling unwanted. A lot of emotions. Loneliness. Grief. Those are things, but we don't go out and just kill people. And I mean, where he's at right now, he doesn't walk around. They have guards and stuff for them, but they want to put him out here unmedicated and living the life that he wants to live. What if he hears a voice that just tells him, go
quit taking your meds and get back on that killing horse?
Kill the lady at Circle K because she didn't give you the right change. Because his mother, only voices she was putting out there was, I love you, giving him guidance. You need
trying to get him help, trying to put him in a rehab facility. He had tested positive for drugs. And she knew he had a problem.
Doing spice, which is undetectable, but he was. We saw it on his phone. He had run away before, but we had saw it on his phone where he was not just using it, selling it. Him and his little group he ran with.
And what was so tragic, too, in that situation is he also left behind a little sister. When he took his mom's life and he ended up in prison, he ruined his little sister's life as well. She was left without her mom. She was left in the care of her father, who has taken advantage of her financially. Again, that's proven in court records. And it was the same with Gannon Stauch. He also left behind a younger sister who will never be the same. And in fact, the father, Al Stauch, at sentencing of her trial, of his ex-wife's trial, who killed his son, he also quoted the daughter and what the impact that had on her. So it is so heartbreaking. It is the ripple effect of these selfish acts. And even the grandmother said, Tisha murdered not just Gannon, but she murdered all the security and the love and the hope. And it may not have been the grandmother, but it was a family member who said, she didn't just murder him, but she murdered all that he was going to be, all the love and support and security that he was going to provide to people that he knew as he grew up. And this is a little boy that had already fought to just even be alive.
I know
he had been born premature. He was not even 2 pounds. And the father talked a little bit about that, and so did his mom, who I think has certainly expressed her thankfulness that she was convicted, that Tisha was convicted. She said, parent to parent, I trusted her with my child, and she did not earn that. Clearly, she was not trustworthy.
Right.
But it's heartbreaking just to see, this little girl will live with that for the rest of her life, the loss of her brother, just like Elizabeth Aydelott has to now live with the loss of her mother and the loss of her brother.
Yep, and the loss of her whole mother's family because her dad has estranged us.
Right, which is a whole nother story, but it is.
It just ripples.
Yes, and it's fantastic though. At least and Gannon's sister, Lana, I think is her name, but she is older now. But she was just elementary school.
She was young. I think it was an aunt that got up there and said, "Look, what you've done to our family," and I can relate to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it is wonderful, too, here in Northwest Florida. There are we talk a little bit about the silver linings, and anytime a child is harmed or murdered, I mean, there's just this outpouring of grief and outrage because a normal person can't wrap their mind around why you would hurt a kid. I mean, I think we can all relate to losing our temper here and there and getting frustrated. Parenting is not for the faint of heart,
right.
but to end their life and to try to cover your tracks and to do it because you're resentful of having to take care of them, there's just no excuse for that. And so many people, their hearts were opened and touched by Gannon. And when his body was found here, it opened the door for police to really pursue a case against them, and it also gave the community a place where they could show their grief. And just like we talked about with other cases, Naomi Jones, who was murdered, where they found her body, it became a memorial. And they did the same thing with Gannon. There's a memorial for him right there by the Escambia River Bridge on Highway 90, where they found his body in the suitcase. And there's a cross with his picture and toys. And there's sometimes when there's more things than others, but people don't forget about it. There's a local officer, I think, who makes it a point to keep that memorial going. You and I have stopped there and placed items and talked about it. And people have even stopped on the side of the road when we were there to ask about it. Because people, I think, for the most part, are good. I actually have, I meet once a week, or did for a while, with some investigator friends of mine, just retired homicide investigator. And he's always like, Mollye, you're too Pollyanna. He goes, I know you think the best of people, but they're not always that great. And I don't disagree with him. And I think that's very true. But when you see things like the memorials that are made for Gannon Stauch and also for little Naomi Jones and any number of people who experience, violence that they didn't bring on themselves, it is heartwarming to see that people care and they want to have an outlet for that compassion.
Yeah, it's so sweet. It's an expression of grief, an expression of love. Basically, grief's the receipt that we hold that we loved someone. We don't have to know this little boy to have love for him. He was a little boy. And I mean, I don't even care what he did. He wouldn't deserve to be killed and thrown away like trash and thrown off over a bridge.
Like unwanted baggage.
Yeah, unwanted baggage. When you named it that, I cried because it just makes me sad. So many people want children and love children. I don't have any children, but I have children in my life that I love, nieces, nephews, goddaughters, other children that are just in my life, neighbors. And I can't even imagine how they trust us to take care of them. They trust us to teach them. And it just, it does something to you. But yeah, memorials they're therapeutic.
Yes.
We need them.
Well, any takeaways from this case, Pam?
If your mental health is overwhelming you, get help. It's okay to ask for help. But also, like you said, the red flags, the pink flags and stuff, and we have to be careful who we leave our children with. You can't just leave them with anybody. I mean, a lot of people nowadays just have to go ahead and take their children to work with them if their boss will let them.
Right.
And praise God, a lot of us work for employers that see that sometimes and help us with that.
Well, it is about resources. It is about facing the very real realities that families struggle with. Thank the Lord, most parents aren't, having to repress homicidal tendencies.
Yeah.
But she certainly had horrible problems, and it was the extreme example, but families do need help. And we've seen this in case after case. I mean, even when, predators and pedophiles seek out single moms because they know they're struggling.
Right.
They need help.
Right.
They
They're
need help
vulnerable.
financially. They also need emotional support. They need help watching the kids. And that's how they find them. And so it's this vulnerability, and it would be fantastic. That was my takeaway as well. If we as a community can find ways to provide better resources, whether, and again, I come back to childcare, come back to mental health. And so many times, there's this overwhelming reaction when something horrible happens and we need to change the system. But the reality is that takes time and it takes money and it's slow, and people want a quick fix and they just want to point the finger. And I'm among those as well. I want a quick fix. I don't like to see anyone get hurt or crimes committed. But the solution is more resources in the community, and it's putting money towards that. And it's not, it is being tough on crime, but it's also being tough on the societal problems that create a lot of these issues, so that people can get the help and find places to lean on,
I think churches are a good place.
Faith-based, yes.
Faith-based. My church has a lot of programs for children, and then you meet people that are like-minded or have the same kind of schedule or same parenting type of philosophies.
Ask for help.
Yeah, ask for help. Ask for help. And a lot of times people don't have help, though.
I know. I agree. Well, Pam, thank you again for joining me on this episode. And
thank you.
Thank you for watching us. We appreciate you joining us here on Gulf Coast Confidential Conversations. You can catch this and many other stories on my Gulf Coast Confidential YouTube channel and anywhere you listen to your favorite podcasts. Join us again, and we'll see you next time.